Hello, folks. Welcome. Tonight is our first instalment of the Four Lads Q&A Wednesday. I'm your host, Andrew Stewart, and with me tonight, some gents with some very similar first names. Andrew, how are you, my man? Are you doing good?
I'm very good, Andrew. No, I'm happy to be here, and first live stream that I've done on there, so as well. So all very exciting.
Yes, I'm sure it'll be a good time. We'll have some good chats, I think, tonight. Andy, also on tonight. How are you, mate?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Yeah, my first YouTube podcast, so I'm relying you guys carrying me a bit through this debut.
We'll be fine. We'll be fine. Also, big hello to everyone tuning in live. This will be a fun night. I think we'll have some questions I'll dish out to the guys, and also looking for your questions in the comments as we go on this evening. Last but not least, a big shout out to our sponsors for this year, backing us all the way. We have Rhino Express, Clydeview Joinery, Athol Industrial Solutions, CSD Air Conditioning, Black Rooster, and last but not least, Art of Gold. Thank you for their support for this year. We got a lot to crack on with, gents. Our main kind of topic, which the questions I'll dish out to you guys, which will be kind of based on the first year of Philippe Clement. Does it feel like a year since Michael Beal and Aberdeen happened? Does it? It's a it's a one that we try to forget very quickly. But I'll kind of start us off. So feel free to get your comments in below for questions you want to ask, and we'll go through them. Just while we're going through the questions I have to the guys. Andrew, as I said, we had the debacle of Beal, Aberdeen, Stevie Clifford's main man, Scott Wright, getting sent off that game, the final nail in the coffin. It was announced pretty soon after Beal would be moving away from the club, with a fairly unanimous kind of feeling about that, which then led us to another appointment cycle, and there was a lot of names thrown about. The name that we then landed on was Philippe Clement. Think back to that time. I know it's a year ago. It's hard to think of what you were doing to the date, but what was your thoughts on it, Andrew? What was your thoughts when the immediate breaking news of Philippe Clement being announced as the new Rangers manager?
I think initially, I think just to say that the firing of Michael Beal was probably overdue by that point. I think by common consensus, he probably should have gone after the Old Firm game and instead hung on until, and it was basically just a ticking clock until the next loss, after which he would be fired. That said, I mean, Philip Clement comes in with a pretty decent pedigree. Successful in two different leagues, two different countries, which was promising, and a trophy winner, and someone who was a football manager, which was an upgrade on what we'd had previously. So, yeah, I mean, and not to skip too far ahead, but it's all hypothetical until you start seeing them actually being a manager and start seeing how they set up a team and start seeing what they do. Because you got to remember the squad that he was working with looked totally sharp. I think it's safe to say that at least in those initial few weeks and months, he impressed.
I think hindsight in these kind of discussions is always, it's a dangerous thing to look at. Andy, I think there was a lot of news about Graham Souness being, having a hand in maybe the board's decision. I don't know the percentage of how much his word had as a say, but Frank Lampard was a name, I think, following around the kind of Gerrard kind of style, ex-player, big name. Kevin Muscat was in there, but we landed on Clement as stated. Were you any different to Andrew's opinion on it? Were you kind of happy with it? I'm not gonna throw you under the bus if you were completely in the Lampard camp or the Muscat camp, but personally, I was very interested in Clement. What was your kind of opinion on it?
Yeah, I mean, at the time I was actually quite concerned about the calibre of manager we might attract, because the squad was a bit of a bin fire. Everything was a bit toxic, and you're thinking, who's going to walk into this job? So to get the calibre that you've just mentioned there, Clement, Muscat, Lampard, was actually a pleasant surprise. I'm glad we didn't go with Graham Souness's original recommendation of Lampard, to be honest with you. But when I looked at the CVs, it was Clement actually at first. I thought, yeah, he's the one I sort of fancy. But I had a wee bit of a change of heart as we get closer to the time because the squad was still a bit of a mess. I think we had Stephen Davis in charge, a couple of tough games, and it was, you know what, maybe we need somebody who can a bit of character and knows the club. But as Andrew said, Clement came in and started really, really well, and got his feet under the table and sort of reconnected the fans again. That word synergy that he spoke about. So no, I mean at the start definitely looked like a great appointment.
Yeah, I mean, it's just thinking back to that time. I mean, Andrews, Stephen Davis, as Andy had stated there, he was kind of an interim charge. Obviously, he was winding down the end of his playing career with his knee injury. Stephen Davis, a hero of mine. So he could have did anything whilst he was in charge, and I would have 100% backed him to the hilt, as that's the type of person I am. But I think it was one of these questions where, because of the timing of the sacking, and I think the Europa League campaign still being underway, it was kind of, the sooner we got somebody in, the better for me. I didn't want it to. It was trying to find that perfect niche of quick appointment, but the right appointment. What was your kind of? I think it was the right timing of it. I don't think it was too long, and I don't think the candidate was maybe one that we rushed into. I think we're maybe quick as Rangers support to point the blame at people in charge, but I think they kind of got that kind of recruitment drive spot on.
Yeah, I mean, for one thing, you know, as you say, when Clement was getting appointed, we were in the middle of that Europa League campaign as well, and it didn't look like it was going to be promising for us either, because we just lost to the bottom seeded team in our little group. So I think getting a manager in swiftly, but at the same time, it's a horrible situation to be in, because it's got to be correct and it's got to be fast, and you know, you can't make any mistakes, because you know, if you do, then you're stuck in a bad position again. So it's a tightrope to have walked, but I think the board nailed it. I mean, I've still got a couple of mates who are convinced that Muscat was the man and will never see anything different for the rest of their lives. But you know, it just was a position that we had to get spot on as quickly as possible. I think with the range of options that were out there, certainly with the names that were linked, when it comes down to Muscat or Clement, Clement's got more experience in a league closer to ours, you know, geographically speaking, if nothing else. Which is not to say that a manager can't come in from Japanese and Australian leagues and make an impact on Scottish football, because we have seen that in the past. Ultimately, I mean, you're going to be judged on what you do. As I said, those initial 6 months, I can't think of someone who had a particularly bad word to say against them, because it was getting blood out of a stone, because we knew the status of the squad, we knew what the condition of it was and how poorly it could play. The fact that he managed to win the League Cup, get us through that group stage of European football, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a manager who could have done better in that time. Especially, you know, as a final point, bringing us back in contention in the league, which no one saw coming at the stage we were at when Beal left.
Yeah, we'll go through what the next kind of category was. My questions was what were your individual highlights for the kind of end of the story, as it was kind of meaning for that first phase, at least, heading into this season and the rebuild that followed. I think, you know, personally, with, as we mentioned, that Europa League campaign, you know, Betis away, that game is now kind of gone into folklore, similar to your Braga games. You know, the Ibrox, just for everything that surrounded it, the scenario that the club was in, you know, the new manager, the players kind of reeling from, you know, the previous manager in charge being ousted, and what we'll discuss in certain transfer windows, certain players who were quite, you know, affiliated to that manager. I think, Andy, it's that amount, that challenge that he had, and how much hard work would have had to have gone into those early stages to stamp his authority in, just from the word go, because we really couldn't afford to drop out of that especially that Europa League group. I think it was, given the Limassol treatment, that Betis game was kind of one where we were, if we can get some of them, it would be massive. And then when we did, we went, okay, let's see what this. He says he's not a magician, but I'm maybe starting to believe that, you know, the other side of that coin, and maybe that he is. what was your kind of thoughts with that kind of instant success, so to speak?
Yeah, because it's not just coming in and sort of imposing his ideas or tactics. It's rebuilding the confidence of a squad that was on the ground, basically. So, to pick some of those players up off the ground. I mean, you had Dessers getting cheered off or booed off at home games, and he had a notable uplift under Clement in the first sort of 6 months or whatever. He really picked up and started pulling his weight. So yeah, it's not just the hard work in the training ground. It's just the confidence and the personality to bring everything together. And as you said, it probably culminated really in either the League Cup or the Betis game. The Betis game as a performance and as a result stands on its own, I think, because as you say, nobody saw it coming. It's a historic victory in Spain, and even just the manner of it, it was a really good performance. And no, it was sort of the pinnacle of that period, I think, because he had done really well. I think he won 18 of his first 20 games. So, if you're coming in, inheriting a mess and you're winning 18 out of 20, I don't think anybody can argue at that point.
Andrew, I'll maybe touch on what Andy's just mentioned there, the League Cup. That's one of these major highlights I had for that kind of first stint in charge, from when he was appointed to the end of that season. I know there might have been a lot said, especially from our side of the city, about the fact that they weren't there to be beaten. They'd already been ditched out the cup, and they'll use that to their arguments. But given the kind of bogey history we had in that the League Cup, getting it kind of in the manner we did, I know it was a bit of a challenge. It felt like a bit of a challenge on the day. Aberdeen were doing their best to be resilient and trying to make it a torrid afternoon for us. And getting it over the line. I think of the jubilant scenes back with the new Edmiston House, with the gaffer, with the trophy in the balcony. I think for me, that ranks probably number one for me. I think that first bit of silverware to maybe go, the ship's turning in the right direction, and I think he's earning time, because we've seen managers, being given a lot of time just based off of who they are. I think that Steven Gerrard be one of those managers. I think we seemed to let Gerrard fail almost, but I think Clement earned that time, regardless of what would go into this season. He earned that time with that trophy. You in that same boat?
100%. I mean, it's Rangers, so we live for having shiny things waved at us, right? It's all about getting silverware. It's all about winning things, and ultimately, bringing yourself into competition in the league is very good, because ultimately the title we're always striving towards as a priority every season. So that was really significant, just putting together that winning run and seeing that we could do things. But as you say, the League Cup for me is the big thing, because hell, it's more trophies. And it was a trophy, let's not forget, that we hadn't won since 2011 either, pre-administration and everything else that went along with it. So to finally get that back in the trophy cabinet after such a long time was really significant. And for the noises from the other side of the city, look, if they had managed to beat Killy, who were then beaten by Hearts, who we then beat, then, they'd be in the final. But, got to win games to get there, don't you? So, real shame. And it's ultimately the thing, you get to the final by beating the teams in front of you, hell, and take the easiest route in the world if possible every time, because at the end of it, we get a trophy. So I don't care who we have to beat. It just is what it is. So yeah, I mean, for me, the League Cup's the highlight of that. European, I think we're almost at a stage where we've kind of become jaded by really good performances in the Europa League. We're almost at that stage where we can just write those off as like, yeah, well, of course, obviously we did that because, Europa League's our place for whatever reason. We just seem to come alive in that competition. So there's probably a sense of me taking like the Real Betis game for granted a little bit, but I think for me, it's got to be the League Cup because it's silverware at the end of the day, and that's what's important for Rangers.
Andy, obviously, Andrew's touched on it, it's silverware. That's the main thing. We would find ourselves back in a title race, miraculously. I think it is key to keep saying that, miraculously, we're back in a title race. Because I think Andrew said it earlier, there was times with Beal in charge where we were it felt like it was already over by that point of his sacking. It felt like this is insurmountable. It would take something quite spectacular, and funnily enough, something spectacular would end up happening. As you said, we went on that run. I think you said 18 of 20 games. I think it was a stretch of 11 in a row. We won under Clement. It just felt like there was maybe that feel good factor. I know they kind of say like the new manager bounce, but it felt like we had that kind of single goal ahead of us, that we were going to keep winning the next game in front of us and just take that game at a time. I know that kind of mentality was echoed under Steven Gerrard. That was very much his thing during the undefeated season, was we take the next game as it comes and we don't look too far ahead. But he was doing that from first position. Clement was doing that from chasing. And the amount of pressure that we put on them, I think, given the fact that, we took it down to the wire essentially, and almost had one of these magnificent stories. I'm very much bought into him as the man to lead us forward for the next season, 2 seasons. I think he has earned that time, and I think in time we will see that success. That period of time itself has, I'd say, it stapled that kind of feeling of he's going to do this f- to the post. I think that run specifically um, kind of showed that he can be that charging leader for us. And I'll say to the question, was there a point where you were maybe starting to pinch yourself and going, "Are we really back in this?" Because I was for me at times rolling into games going, "This is just slowly rolling and slowly rolling, slowly rolling," and I try not to get ahead of myself. Were you kind of in that same kind of feeling?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when Clement came in, we had no business being in a title race that season at all. I think I said numerous times on Twitter and stuff, it's probably our worst squad since 18-19, so Gerrard's first season. So we had no business stringing together, 18 wins out of 20, putting pressure on Celtic or anyone else at that point, but we did. And as you say, if you go towards the end of that run, you could feel the buzz at the games at Ibrox, you could hear the crowd, and I think they thought, and I think if you look pre-Motherwell, pre-dip, if you like, we were in a really good position in that league. We were doing really, really well. The momentum was all with us. So that's the key thing. We were the ones that were winning games while they were dropping points. So we were closing the gap and then actually going ahead. So to put ourselves in that position was, I think you used the word miraculous. I think that's almost right. Because as I said, I don't think we had any business being there, but we did put ourselves there. And if we sort of cut it off at that point, I think the manager deserves a lot of credit for putting us in that position in the first place.
I'll highlight one of our kind of questions, and it goes in line with my next kind of line of discussion I was having. We were mentioning how miraculous this run was, and the key thing we were saying throughout these kind of answers to the questions was, with the squad he had at his disposal, we were under no illusions, and we still aren't, that there was elements of this team, and definitely at that time there was a lot of elements of the team that needed worked on. I'll bring up the question. Obviously, this is now a couple windows past from when he first came in. How many windows? I'll read that question. How many transfer windows realistic do we need to be in a position to win the league? And do we trust the people at the club to purchase the players, given our poor recruitment record over the last 3 years? Andrew, I think we certainly had some good picks and also some very poor picks. I think our recruitment over the last few seasons has been hit or miss, to say. I think that's a nice way of saying it. There's been some players that, a key player I say is Todd Cantwell. I think at the time that looks like a really good signing with that kind of pedigree we can rebuild them and sell them on. We're now at the 16th of October 2024 and he's not here anymore. He's going to get judged on that, especially since we brought in a director of football recruitment, Niels Coppen. I think over the last window and the window before the January, the trend has started to go back up. I think we're kind of stable to the post where our intentions are in terms of recruitment, our player trading model. I think there was maybe an element of the support that weren't happy with that being the route we were going, but modern football is modern football. You could do a whole other podcast on that in itself. Andrew, how do you feel about Coppin's first kind of dabbles into the windows, especially as being involved as the Rangers director of football recruitment?
Yeah. Well, I think what's been clear is like the direction of travel in terms of where we want to go with the squad. The transfers in have skewed a lot younger, I think, than we were expecting. Certainly, when we were talking pre-season, we were expecting more experience being brought in. But working within the parameters that we've got, which is reduce the wage bill and reduce the cost of what we're spending as well. I think we've done quite well at identifying some youthful players who have got talent and room to grow as well. You look at Yefti, you look at Bayrami, you look at Big Nana, Casawero, and you're seeing players who have got potential, and some of whom who look like they're ready-made there. Like Yefti has that left-back slot now, unless anything drastic happens for me. He shouldn't be leaving there. We've been unfortunate with a couple as well. Oscar Cortez is still unavailable, and looks like that will be the case for a while, which is a shame because again, looks like a really talented player. But overall, I think in terms of what you're looking to do, building up a squad from the ground up and trying to find players who become assets who you can then sell and then do some kind of, I don't know, player trading model or something like that. That's what we're looking to do, right? Allegedly. So I think the direction has been promising, and some of the talent that's been identified has been good. I think, as ever, whatever voodoo curse is over Rangers at the moment that causes our players to suddenly develop exploding knees once they're in the building, that continues to haunt us. Not a lot we can do about that. We've seen comments from Phil Clement about the lack of usage of equipment at the training centre in terms of managing injuries, managing muscle strains, etc. And so the fact that that was identified as an issue by Clement so early on was significant, because I think it identifies more of a systemic issue that we had within the club in terms of, it's great to get players in and it's great to get talented players in, especially ones who are young, who you can potentially grow and flip for value. But it does no one any good, not the player or the club, if they pick up a knee injury 2 games into the season and then are unavailable for 50% of the games. No one benefits from that. So it becomes a question of, I think the signings on paper are all good. Oscar Cortez has been great for the games he's been available. For me, it then becomes a question of managing that squad and making sure they stay healthy. Until we're in a position where we can reliably keep all of these players healthy, there's still going to be question marks. But I think overall the strategy and the players we have identified and the way that some of them have settled in and hit the ground running has been really promising for me. So, I don't know, B+, I guess.
Andy, long gone are the days of Bongani Zungus and Aaron Ramsey's. We started to be somewhat sensible. I think players like Connor Barron, Oscar Cortez, and on paper looked like a decent signing. Obviously, hindsight being so superb that I wish we could have had, with just unfortunate the situation we have with injuries. JFD, Diamande, Hamza Egaman, and obviously Nana, Big Cass. I call him Big Cass, but I'll need to get used to the name, our nickname that we're going with him. It seems to flip flop for me. I don't know what I prefer the best, but he's definitely falls into that category as well, doing well for the Dutch unders team there during the international break there. That kind of criteria, the age range, the amount of games played by some of these players for the age that they are. I think obviously a lot was said about Conor Barron last season, not playing as many games as maybe he should have. But before that, playing games out on loan since quite a young age, definitely down in League Two. These kind of players playing these games before coming to the club to then, I think as Coppin had said, they need to maybe drown a little in the kind of situation that they are now under, being playing for Rangers in the club that they are at. But we're going to reap the rewards of that down the line. I think I'm happy with most. I'm going to sit on the fence and say I'm happy, but I want to see more as one of these guys. I was wanting more in at that deadline day, getting that feeling of, oh, can we get another one? Can we get another one? But I'm chuffed with the business, Andy. What's your feelings on Coppin and maybe even just the that togetherness of Clement and Coppin's kind of mentality and criteria of these signings?
Well, I think Coppin himself had said just this week that it was a first step. So I think in answer to the question that was asked by the viewer, it's not a one window fix. It's going to be probably at least another 2 windows, January next summer, before you really get the sort of spine of a team together that might challenge for a title. I don't think it'll be this season. But in terms of the signings, as you said, we've got a manager that's bought into the strategy, bought into the kind of profile that we're signing. He understands that it'll take time for young players to come in. The other thing is you're never going to get 100% success rate. So you sign 8 players, you're never going to get all 8 A-pluses in the starting lineup. But if we look at Jefty, Barron, Bajrami, for the ones that have featured the most and contributed the most to date, I think that's really positive. Those guys should be in the team nearly every week. And then you've got the likes of Big Nana, is that what we're going for? So we'll get him to come in as well. Hopefully see a bit more of him because he's looked good when he's played, and I think he just needs a bit more time now to show what he can do. And if we can build on that, if you can get a base together this season that you can then add to, you identify maybe some areas of weakness, whether it's right wing, whether we need another striker, whether centre back still needs upgraded, you can then do that over the next 2 windows maybe. But I think as long as we're getting a decent hit rate and getting guys that are going to come in and upgrade their positions, because that's the thing we haven't done for 2 years. Almost every big signing we made has either been injured or has been a downgrade on kind of who they're replacing, whether it's Kent, Miraculous. The guys that come in just haven't been anywhere near the level. And that's why kind of we are where we are, sacking Michael Beal, bringing in Philippe Clement, is that the recruitment has just been horrendous, basically. So I hope this summer we're seeing the just a sort of first step and try to fix that and get a couple of guys in that can really be first teamers, young guys that can improve, and we just need to build in that over the next 2 windows, I think.
Andrew, based on that time period, say 2 windows, Rangers won't be able to get in an unlimited amount of players. We don't have that budget to just go and buy a player if we need a player. We might have to just deal with what we have in certain cases. I know Tom Lawrence did feel like a bit of a new signing every time he came back from injury because he would maybe play 2 or 3 games and get injured and come back again and get injured again. But having Tom Lawrence, players like Ravi Matondo even, I know Ridvan was a relatively new signing at the time. These kind of guys are already in the club from when Clement came in, utilising them through that kind of early, time in his appointment, trying to get to the windows and through the windows and into the next window. I think there will definitely be that sense of utilisation of players who are already in the building. I know there was an element of that with Scott Wright before he was moved on. He seemed to feature almost every other week, even though there's mixed opinions about why he should have done that. We've seen Kieran Dowell starting to make appearances in recent weeks. Obviously, some of these have been injury related, but as I said, that's not going to go away based on recent seasons. So utilisation of the talent we already have in the building is going to be a staple and of what he's going to have to do as a Rangers manager. I'm confident in him being able to do that, as we did see it early on. Is there a feeling that that is a reliable strategy? Because it did feel. I mean, seeing Kieran Dowell come on against Leon was a bit of a stretch for myself. I know that is necessity through injury, but there was a feeling of I can't go on like this if that's going to keep happening. What's your feeling on these utilising players that we already have at the club?
I think there's got to be a sense of, excuse me, pragmatism when it comes to this. We've seen Hadji come back into the building as well after being frozen out. And to be honest, we know the limitations we're working with already. We've got a limited budget. We know that the January window is always crap as well because, no truly great players are usually available during that period. So it's about being pragmatic. Kieran Dowell would have been about the 6th choice on my list of players to come in for that game. But ultimately, managers will pick players who they think they can do a job in the position they've put them in. That's why Scott Wright who was an absolute legend. I know Stevie's watching, so this is all for him. Scott Wright was a player who was maybe a symbol of how poorly some of our recruitment had been done, because he kept finding himself in squads when really he should have been moved on long ago. The fact that he was still featuring was a bad sign, but it was about working with what you've got, and that's ultimately what any manager has to do. Clement proved that he could do it at the start of his tenure at Rangers, and so ultimately I think it's going to be about doing that, doing what you can to get what you can out of the squad. We know this is going to be a period. I think it's at least another two excuse me, 2 windows away with where we're at. And not only that, we also need at the same time to be trying to win the league, put ourselves in a better position to get more money, because finances are going to help unlock more that we can do. And it's a crap position to be in as a manager, because you need to do better, but you need to do it without getting players. But if you do better, then you'll get better players. It's a catch-22 of a situation, because you're trying to do both at the same time, and that's tricky. Ultimately, we're limited by where we are. We know what our restrictions are. It'd be great to say, some Saudi billionaire's going to come in and make the make the club flush with cash, and that will solve all our problems. But I don't see that as being a likely situation in the future. So we have to work with what we've got. Clement's proved that he can do it in the past. You would be hopeful that he could continue to do so, especially with a director of football who seems quite aligned with what he wants to be doing as well. So you'd be, that's what you're hoping for. I think it's fair to say that there's still some questions about, how achievable that is.
I think we all just have to take a wee second and say that was good from Andrew, and before he's smited down by Sneevy for questioning Scott Wright being, I think we all know how good Scott Wright is, and by no means was I slating him earlier on. I wish him all the best at Birmingham City. Andy, this season, pre-season didn't exactly go to plan. Some games looked quite poor. We did look like a squad gelling, and losing a game in pre-season to Rangers support is just about as worst as bad as losing a title decider, losing a Champions League final, losing a Europa League final. Pre-season is just as important to the support, it seemed. And the criticism towards the manager certainly rose its head. I'm going to throw up a comment, Kenny. We are having a real good discussion. You've had to bring down the tone to, is he going to be here? That's a difficult one. And I think, criticism was definitely thrown his way. Some things were rightly thrown at him, and some things maybe not. I think he took a lot of the blame for maybe certain players at the times as well. Maybe some of the comments he said. How much justification do you think there is in terms of the criticism he gets, and that kind of, I suppose, leads into Kenny's comment of, based on this season and the games he was maybe getting criticised for, the loss to Hearts on the opening day, the Old Firm defeat. It's a tough question, and I hate the fact that Kenny's just throwing that one in just as a pipe bomb and just moved away. I'll let you answer the question that Kenny has put up, and then also mention that the criticism that Clement has had.
I think I'll kind of half answer the question. I think Clement's got to the end of the season almost regardless. With the state the club's in, there's nobody there really to sack him, replace him, or do anything else. So I think you've got to give him to the end of the season. If we go back to pre-season and maybe how we're started, I think some of the criticism's valid. I think given how we ended last season, we wanted a refresh. He's had his own pre-season. He told us we'd be fitter, we'd have less injuries. And I think with more time to work with the players that he didn't get last season, you hope to see his identity, his vision for the team, and really see signs of progress. But to be honest, the start of the season has been a bit flat. I don't know whether it's playing at Hampden, whether it's some of the signings taking a bit of time to gel and the team taking a bit of time to come together, obviously made the comment about October, November until we see the best of this Rangers team. So we're here now, and I think we kind of need to start seeing it, because to date I don't think we have. I think it's kind of dragged itself along. 5 wins from 7 sounds all right. Plenty of clean sheets in there as well. But I just think we're not performing at a level that's going to be sustainable over a season if we really want to challenge even, or get close to challenging. So whether we'll be here next year will really depend on what he does over the next few months, I think, because he's got a big few months to try and really get a tune out of this team and prove that we're going in the right direction. That was the big thing under Gerrard, is that we could see progress. There was something we could buy into. I don't think we're seeing that yet this season. So I think we really need to start seeing just those small signs of improvement, and that we can see a plan coming together with the team that he's got.
Andrew, I'll keep it up that question from Kenny, because I want to get your thoughts on it as well. I think what Andy said is spot on. I think every manager has, a kind of borderline amount that he has to do to keep his job. If you start going well off the deep end, then for the safety of the club, the board should take action. This board, however, has said they are backing him to the hilt. They are similarly wired in terms of where they think the club is and where the club wants to go, and they think that Clement is the man. Obviously, the contract extension as well kind of signals that. But as I said at the start there, if things go off the deep end, we're a demanding bunch, and calls for sackings have definitely happened in the past that the board has been quick to answer. Do you think it is one of these things where it's only time will tell? Because it is that we ideally want them to be going in the right direction, but if the worst were to happen, the board would have to do their job.
Yeah. To be honest, it comes down to the key games, right? We want to win stuff, and unfortunately, in this league, the biggest obstacle to Rangers winning things is a team who are currently sitting top of the table. So the fact that Clement has not managed to get a win there is concerning. I think it's a difficult set of circumstances that we've been in. A couple of games that have gone to draws, or a game that went to draws. Still can't get over that Rami Matondo screamer that will never be talked about because it came in a draw, so it doesn't matter. And obviously the fact that the season ended with a loss in a cup final to them as well. So that doesn't set a particularly happy mood for the summer. We have a game in the new year at Ibrox against them, and I think serious questions would be asked if we are not winning that game, or at least in fact, no, I was going to say, even if it looks close, I don't think that would really wash with the support. We're sitting third in the league at the moment. Admittedly, the two top teams have still got to play each other, so something's going to give there. Even if it's a draw, we'll still make up ground, fingers crossed, as long as we're winning our games. And that's the position that we find ourselves in. With the draw and then the loss this season in the league so far, we need to just keep chugging away, keep winning, and that gap should hopefully close, because few teams can go the entire season unbeaten. We've done it, obviously, but not everyone's built like us. So that's the thing for me. We are still in all three cup competitions. We are still in the Europa League in the new format, where we stand a decent chance of earning our way through to the next stages. So it's all about the results. I think calls for him to be sacked now are premature, because ultimately we are in a bedding in period. We've already had expectations set that this little period coming up is going to be when we'll start seeing the best of this team. And I think it's fair to say we let that run happen. We get to the end of January and we're in a worse position in the league if we're out of a cup competition by that point. That's when serious questions are going to be asked. So do I think he'll be here this time next season? I hope so. I mean, because if he is, then it means he's winning stuff. The board may have backed into the hilt, as you say, Andrew S. But it is going to come down to the boards aren't ignorant to the fans, and they will respond if the situation starts getting untenable. And that will happen if Clement starts failing to win some of those big games. So that's what it comes down to for me. Deliver on the pitch, he'll be here. If he fails to deliver, questions are going to be asked.
Andy, I'll throw up another kind of comment here. It's something I completely forgot about, to be perfectly honest. The prospect of getting them in our cup journey for the League Cup as it wraps up, before Christmassy time, as it always does, the League Cup. I'm just going to call it a League Cup because I can't remember if it's Premier Sports or Viaplay or some betting company, because that's what it is nowadays. We've seen the side of the coin in which we get dumped out of this, and potentially that would trigger some sort of tidal wave of it's not good enough, the board to make a decision, and then that question that Kenny asked previously is answered. The other side of the coin is we play them potentially in this cup and we beat them, we win the cup, we retain our League Cup. If we were to win the cup, potentially losing the league to them, and I'll throw the scenario: a cup double but lose the league. That's as plain as I can say. A cup double and you lose the league. Does he get another season at it? Do we continue to back him based on 2 cups but not the league that we want?
I think he probably does. I think he probably does get another season based on that, providing the league isn't an absolute write-off and we're third in the league or something ridiculous like that. I think we need to see progress. As Andrew says, you need to win shiny things. If that means beating them to get them, then even better, because as Andrew said as well, it has to beat them. You can't, you're not going to be successful Rangers if you can't beat them, because it'll either mean you don't win the league or you don't win the trophies that you play them in. So, as you say, we've sometimes got a tendency to look at these things as a negative, and that, we could lose to them in the League Cup. But as you said, we could also beat them in the League Cup, and suddenly, I mean, we've seen it before over the years, different managers, different periods. Teams that have had a bit of a hoodoo over one another, suddenly one team wins and it flips. So it could happen. I hope it does, because it means we've got another shiny thing and we've beaten them as well. But just to come back to your actual question, I think if he wins 2 trophies and we're basically within touching distance in the league, then it definitely gets another season, because I don't see this as a season where we should be absolutely expecting this squad to win the league. I don't think it's in a strong enough position to do it. So as long as we're not woefully underperforming in the league, I think he would get another season on that basis.
I'll throw it out there to you, Andrew, as well on that one. Just that kind of cup double but no league kind of scenario. I think it's another. He buys himself more time. I think, as you said, winning things, that's what we want. Granted, it's not going all the way to win the league and get the league back, which obviously, the longer we don't win that league, the harder the ground is to catch them in terms of transfer budgets, as the Champions League, money goes to a windfall, starts to head their direction. It certainly would make it harder to not win the league and continuing to keep missing the big goal, the main goal. But taking the Scottish Cup and the League Cup, certainly given our kind of history, especially in the League Cup, as we mentioned beforehand, with that kind of long hiatus from lifting it, I think that would go a long way to even just kind of changing the mentality and the building of, we can go and win things, so let's make it a habit, because that was for their nice run. That was one of the things that came up between Rangers fans in conversation, is we don't have a team of winners, and they do. They're used to that. They've got that winning bug, and certainly winning a cup double would, and on top of one of them being retaining the League Cup, would go a long way to starting to have that winner's mentality, starting to that seed to grow in the building.
It's an interesting question, because for me, I think the league's the main thing we should be striving for every year, and the cups effectively are a nice bonus. And we're in a position where I don't think we can turn our nose up at cups right now, because you can do that if you're in a position where you're very successful. We have not been as successful as we should have been over the past few seasons. And so for me, I think a cup double probably does buy him another season, but I'm not sure that it should. Because for me, the league, although the league itself doesn't have particularly fantastic prize money, is the access to the Champions League and that position there. Even this season, where there's not direct access to the group stages, you're still a game away from being in that group stage. Whereas if you finish second, you're in the second round playoff, and so you've got 2 more games that you've got to get through before you can get there. And for me, the way that you start closing this gap is you start picking up that money, because it's a Champions League. I don't think anyone's seriously expecting us to compete, because, you know, if we can talk about how financially outmatched we are by the team at the top of the table, there's no comparison. I mean, hell, you just need to look at our Europa League group at the moment and see how, you know, outmatched we are financially by some of those teams. It comes down to the league for me, and I think the cups would be a great thing to do. A cup double would be massive, frankly, in terms of the success that we've had. But for me, I think the league should be the be all and end all, and it's a difficult situation to be in right now. But it's a long old season. We've played 7 games so far in the league at the moment, 7, 8. I don't know. It's just so exciting. I can't keep track of it all. But we're not completely out of this title race yet, because we know that a season can, you know, go up and down, let's say, over the course of it. So the league's not out of sight, but I think that's what we need to be aiming for next season, like to achieve going into next season, because we need to be competing, and the only way we do that is start making some more money.
Yeah, I mean that is it. That is it. It's one of these things where time will tell. That's the long and the short of it. We're talking about months down the line. We're talking about even this. Yeah, we're so early in this season. As I said, maybe 7 games, 8 games. I don't know how we are in terms of the league campaign. You know, still quite early in the League Cup, but still got a couple of games to play before we get to that opportunity to win the shiny thing again. But I mean, this is one of these things. This is the discussion that you're going to get in these Q&A shows. This is why we want to do this. I have to say, it's been good. I think we had a good discussion tonight. For the first show, this was kind of based on, you know, Philippe Clement tonight, but as we go on, we'll answer a lot more. I'll give you a kind of preview to maybe the next show and the shows ahead, as we do want to kind of tackle some of these interesting topics, and one of these interesting topics is as follows. Scott in the comments has put, do you think fan media is failing to hold those at the club accountable, given the access they have and the club's success in holding the MSM arm's length? That is one of these juicy topics as we want to discuss. As someone in fan media, as 3 guys tonight, it's one of these where we go, oh, we got hot under the collar. But it's a fair point. The support is here to bring us to account just as much as we are to bring the club to account. So I'm going to move away from it because I don't have an answer to that question. And I'm happy to sit back and listen to the guys' answers on this one. So I just asked Andrew the question, so I'll go to Andy first. Sorry for again throwing you under the bus with this one, but this is the questions we want to answer.
Thanks for that. The first question I've had first tonight, and it's a belter. I think sometimes there's an unrealistic expectation in fan media. It's not me that's doing it. Stevie's the one and Shona sitting in the press conferences most weeks, so I don't have to take the flak and I don't have to ask the questions. But you know, those guys aren't going to go in there and start banging the table and shouting, you know, why did you do this? Why did you do that? That's just not how it works. The other thing is, most of the press conferences, you're sitting down with the manager or a player. You're not sitting down with John Bennett most weeks. You're not sitting down with James Bisgrove or whoever the CEO is going to be. So you don't really get access to these guys to ask the question. I think there is an accountability issue. I don't think there's many great platforms where fans, fan media, or whoever, even mainstream media, can hold the club or those running it to account. But it's one of these things where I think when things are going bad, it's why didn't you ask so-and-so a question? I think it's a very difficult job, because I've heard press conferences when, whether it's Stevie or David Edgar at Ibrox or some of these guys go in the last tough questions to the manager. I think they were asking him quite hard questions after the Leon game, and people just ignore it, or they don't realise that they've actually been asked by the same guys that they're criticising. So, no, I think it's a difficult one. And as I say, a bit more access would help. You know, if you were sitting down with the guys running the club, I'm sure Stevie and all the team can be asking the kind of questions we all want to ask. But I just don't think it's feasible to expect guys to be, you know, tub thumping and shouting and screaming over the press conference desk and demanding answers from somebody who's sitting upstairs. It's a very difficult one. There's a balance there as well, because you can ask the manager a really tough question. You know, why was something so bad? He's not going to sit there and answer it. He'll just deflect or give you a generic answer. They're very good at that. So I think as long as the expectations are realistic, then I think the guys do a pretty good job, and not just here at Four Lads. I think across the board the guys do a pretty fair job.
Andrew, I'll give you your say on it. I think there's a perception about what the fan media actually is, and just how much access there is. I think you're quite similar to me in how our situation is, obviously, on this show, and Stevie and so on, and about just how much access we truly do have. It isn't. I'd love to say I was having lunch with Phil at the weekend, enjoying the international break, but unfortunately he's a busy man, and the businessmen at the top are just as equally busy. Because when they say they're running the club, it is true. Funnily enough, it's hard to tell from us just going to support at the weekends and watching them near and far, but it's a business at the end of the day. There's a kind of, I don't want to say it's a misinterpretation of what fan media actually is, Andrew.
Yeah, and I mean, let's be honest about what kind of access that fan media actually have. I mean, we look at Four Lads. Stevie gets a decent seat at the game, along with Shona, and gets to sit in the press conference. But, I mean, if we look at the questions that get asked in press conferences in general, I mean, I'm not sure what folk are wanting us to ask. If you say, that was atrocious, Phil, what are you playing at? Like, constructively as a manager, how do you answer that without just going, I don't know, man, we lost. I don't know what to tell you, the level of access that we have isn't particularly fantastic. We have less of a platform than mainstream media. We're not a big newspaper with millionaires backing us. We're, a few guys and a pair of girls who are just doing podcasts and writing blogs and, just trying to do our best to give folk out there the world as we see it. And I don't think we could be accused of being in a position where we soft soap how we feel about the board, the players, the manager. Listen to us after a poor game. I mean, you listen to the Sunday show after the Old Firm defeat. I don't think anyone there was particularly happy or in a particularly generous mood towards anyone at Rangers at that point. So I think within what we can do as fan media, I think we do what we can. I think we have never shied away from giving our own honest opinions, because ultimately that's all they are. We don't really have that much power, to be honest. We can make our thoughts known, and the people who tune in and listen to us, we hope they take those away and think it's complete nonsense or agree with us, as the case may be. But ultimately, we're just guys and girls giving our opinions. We don't have much more power than that. And I mean, Stevie has obviously been asked this question a couple of times before. I mean, you can look at some of the press conferences in which he's asked hard questions to managers. You look at the defeat after Leon and Stevie's comments there. I think that was maybe one of the hardest questions that came from that whole press conference there. So I think we do what we can. If there are specific questions that folk want asked at press conferences, throw them in the comments underneath the videos. Stevie will ask them within reason. If you want to ask about Clement's hairstyle, tips, then Stevie's the man to ask, obviously. But beyond that, we're just in a position where we can ask questions, but that's all we can do. We don't have influence at the boardroom level, certainly. So we're restricted in what we can do. But we're here to act as a voice of fans. So if folk want questions asked, if folk have things that they want answered, we can do our best to do that. Ultimately, we're like you guys. We've just got webcams, so we're doing what we can here, and we're open to suggestions from fans, because ultimately that's all we are as well. We're just fans with a very, very small platform, but we'll do what we can to make your voices heard as much as we can.
Yeah, I think we've kind of summed it up. I'll say it as blankly and as obvious as it can be. I'm a 22-year-old just out of university working his first full-time job. I don't think our interim chairman is going to take too much of what I'm saying into, making it list item number one on any agenda, simply because he wouldn't have seen me. I wouldn't have got near him. I'm 22 and I am not a businessman, and we will try and get as close to it as we can, but it's a full-time 24/7 football business, and I think it's a lot harder than it's perceived to be, to make these connections and have these conversations. It's not I can't look in my contacts and see James Tav on my phone, unfortunately. It'd be useful for me getting some tips to play right back, I suppose, but for my football team, but that's unfortunately not how it is. But I suppose I can dream. Maybe one day James will hit me up with some tips about crossing the ball. But till then, we'll wrap up for the evening. I think it's been an interesting first show. I think questions have been asked, and I think it will lead us towards these kind of hard-hitting topics in the next episodes as they come along in the near future. But until then, I have to unfortunately wrap up for this evening. But before then, I would like to thank my guest for the evening, Andrew. Thank you for your wisdom this evening and having my back there on that question. Quite a difficult question for myself to answer, but I think you've summed it up perfectly, mate.
Look, we're just here to give our opinions, right? I mean, I'm not saying I'm the most intelligent person in the world, because I'm definitely not. All we can do is give our own views, and it's been a fun show. We hope folk have enjoyed it. Ultimately, that's what we're here to do: have a chat with you guys and answer your questions on the show. So and Andy, Andrew S, you've been fantastic as well. Still not happy about the three Andrews situation. It's becoming untenable as far as I'm concerned, but we'll figure it out, I'm sure. But it's been a pleasure, mate. So thank you.
I think we had the rotas sorted by alphabetical order by accident for this show this weekend, but I think we've certainly got by this evening. I think it's gone quite well. Andy, thank you for coming on tonight. Good chat from yourself, and well, I hope you enjoyed.
No, thanks, guys. Always a pleasure to talk about Rangers. So, really enjoyed that, and hopefully more to come.
And last but not least, thank you to our sponsors, as I previously stated: Rhino Express, Cliveview Joinery, Athol Industrial Solutions, CSD Air Conditioning, Black Rooster, and Art of Gold. And also anyone tuning in live or listening back on whatever you listen to your Rangers content on. But until next time, I say goodbye for myself, Andrew Stewart, and we'll see you next time.
Four Lads podcast is sponsored by Rhino Express, Cliveview Joinery, Athol Industrial Solutions Limited, and CSD Air Conditioning, along with Art of Gold. Thank you for listening or watching the podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show.